The little girl burst through the diner door like she was running for her life. Chairs scraped. The bell above the door slammed against the frame. Rain poured off her hair, her dress clinging to her arms. Her tiny hands trembling as she looked over her shoulder, like someone might still be chasing her. Every head in the diner turned. Mara froze mid-pour, the coffee overflowing its cup and dripping onto the counter. She'd seen fear before, the kind that made grown men shake, but nothing like this. The girl couldn't have been more than 8, barefoot, shivering, eyes wide with the kind of terror that doesn't come from monsters, under the bed. Then she said it, voice cracking, breathless. "He's coming!" The words hit the room like a gunshot. The truckers at the corner booth went still. A waitress dropped a fork. Someone turned off the jukebox without thinking. Mara's heart kicked against her ribs. "Who's coming, baby?" But the girl didn't answer. She just darted beneath a table, the one by the window closest to the door, curling up tight, clutching her pink backpack against her chest like a shield. Outside, a set of headlights swept across the parking lot, slow, searching. Mara's blood ran cold. Through the rain-smeared glass, she saw a dark sedan idling just beyond the pumps, engine running, wipers slashing across the windshield, a shape in the driver's seat barely visible. "Lock the door," she whispered. One of the regulars, old Frank, moved quick for a man his age, turned the bolt, flipped the sign to closed. The sedan didn't move. Inside, the girl was crying silently now. Shaking so hard the table legs rattled, Mara crouched down beside her, voice low, steady. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe now. Nobody's gonna hurt you here." But the girl just shook her head. Her lip trembled. Then she reached into her backpack, slow, terrified, and pulled out a crumpled napkin. Her fingers were smeared with mud. Her knuckles scraped raw. She pushed the napkin toward Mara with both hands, whispering, "I wasn't supposed to tell anyone." "But I can't let him find her again." Mara took it, confused, trembling. The napkin was soaked and torn, but the handwriting underneath was still visible. Faint, hurried, like it had been written in a moving car. "If you're reading this, she didn't make it home. Please, find my daughter." Mara's vision blurred. Her stomach dropped. The girl was staring at her now, pleading, terrified. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "He hurt my mom. He'll hurt me next." Lightning flashed, filling the diner with white light. And through the glass, Mara saw the car door open. A man stepped out, tall, broad, moving slow, like he already knew where she was. Mara's throat went dry. She whispered one word, "Back room, now." The truckers didn't need more. 2 of them stood, blocking the view from the windows, while Mara scooped the trembling girl into her arms. As the rain hammered harder against the glass, she thought only one thing. Whatever this little girl was running from, it wasn't over, and whatever that napkin meant, it was only the beginning. The bell above the door jingled, too softly for how hard the wind was blowing outside. He didn't knock, didn't wait, just walked in. The man was drenched, rain dripping from his jacket onto the checkerboard floor. He scanned the diner once, slow, deliberate, like he already knew what he was looking for. Mara felt her chest tighten. That look, cold, searching, she'd seen it before. Years ago, when her sister had come to her door in the middle of the night, hiding from a man who smiled just like that. "Sorry, sir, we're closed," Frank said from the counter, his hand resting near the baseball bat he kept behind the register. The man ignored him. "Little girl came through here?" His voice was smooth. Too smooth. The kind that tried to sound polite but came out dangerous. "About this tall? Brown hair?" Mara stayed half-crouched behind the counter, the girl still trembling beside her in the shadow of the booth. She whispered, "Stay down. Don't move." The girl nodded, pressing her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. "Don't know what you're talking about," Frank said evenly. The man tilted his head. "You sure? Because her backpack's missing, and her mom's going to be awful worried if she doesn't come home." That last line twisted something in Mara's stomach. He said it like a threat, not a concern. Like her mom wasn't someone to protect, but someone already gone. Mara straightened slowly, pretending to wipe the counter. "Sir," she said, forcing calm, "like he said, we're closed." "Storm's bad, so if you need to get off the road, there's a motel down." The man's gaze snapped to her. And just like that, the mask dropped. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. "You seen her?" Not a question. A certainty. Behind her, Mara could feel the girl clutching the fabric of her apron, tiny fingers digging in, terrified. She needed to buy time. Think. Do something. Her voice came out steady, but her hands were shaking under the counter. "No, sir. Haven't seen anyone but my regulars tonight." He took a step forward, boots squelching on the wet tile. "You sure about that? Because she's not good at keeping quiet. Never has been." That line, "never has been," hit like ice water. This wasn't random. He knew the girl. Maybe the mother, too. Frank stepped between them, old but unflinching. "Buddy, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." The man's jaw tightened. "You asking me, old man?" Mara's pulse hammered. She glanced toward the back room door, the one that led to the kitchen and the alley exit. But the girl shook her head violently, whispering, "He'll see us." He always sees. The headlights from the sedan still glowed through the rain-streaked window. Someone else was inside, a second shape, sitting in the passenger seat. Waiting. "Listen," Mara tried again, softer. "You're scaring my customers." "You should—" The man slammed his hand on the counter so hard the salt shaker jumped. The whole diner went silent again. Then, the faint sound of a motorcycle rumbling in the distance. Then another. And another. The man frowned, glancing toward the windows as a dozen headlights appeared through the curtain of rain, twin beams slicing through the night. "Engines low, synchronized, purposeful," Frank smirked faintly. "You picked the wrong diner, friend." Mara's heart lifted for half a second. She knew that sound, those bikes. They belonged to the local veterans group that stopped by every Thursday for pie and black coffee. Tough men, all leather and scars, but kind underneath. They called themselves the Iron Hawks. The man stepped back, suddenly uncertain. "Who are they?" "Neighbors," Frank said. "Good ones." The first biker stepped through the door before the man could answer. Tall, soaked from the rain, his jacket bearing the Hawk insignia, a steel-gray bird with spread wings. He looked at Mara, then at the man. "Everything all right here?" Mara opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The fear was sitting in her throat, thick and heavy. The stranger turned toward the biker. "Private matter," he said. "Just looking for my kid." "Funny," the biker said, his voice low and calm. "Because that kid doesn't look like she wants to be found." He'd seen the little girl's shadow under the booth. The man's smile vanished completely now. His tone sharpened. "This doesn't concern you, pal." But the bikers behind him were already stepping inside, one by one, filling the diner with presence, with power. Not aggressive, not violent, just there. Like a wall she knew wouldn't move. The man's eyes darted from face to face, measuring, calculating. Then he took a single step back. "Tell her she's coming home with me." One way or another, he turned and walked out into the storm. The sedan's headlights flared bright, then faded into the night. Silence filled the diner again, except for the sound of rain on glass and the soft, uneven sobs of the girl still crouched beneath the table. Mara finally exhaled, hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. The lead biker knelt beside the booth, speaking softly. "Hey, sweetheart. You're safe now. Nobody's gonna hurt you, all right?" She hesitated, then crawled out, her backpack still clutched to her chest. The napkin had fallen beside her, soaked and torn. The biker picked it up carefully, eyes narrowing as he read the faded words. He looked at Mara. "Who gave you this?" Mara shook her head. "She did. Said her mom wrote it." He stared at the note for a long moment, rain dripping from his glove. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "We need to find out who this kid really is." And as thunder cracked outside, one thought hung heavy in the air. Whatever truth lay behind that napkin, someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. The diner door shut with a low thud, the sound swallowed by Rain. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the coffee on the counter had gone cold. The little girl sat in the corner booth, hands trembling as she tried to dry her wet face with the sleeve of her jacket. She looked so small there, swallowed by shadows and neon reflection. Mara crouched beside her, gently rubbing her shoulder. "You're safe now, honey. Nobody's gonna hurt you here." The girl didn't answer. Her eyes were far away, staring at the puddle forming near the door, like she was waiting for someone else to walk in. The lead biker, everyone called him Hawk, laid the napkin flat on the counter. The ink was smudged but still legible. 3 short lines, shaky handwriting. Like whoever wrote it didn't have much time. "If you find her, please tell her I didn't run. I was taken." "Mom," Hawk's jaw tightened. The words hit like a punch to the chest. He looked at Frank. "You ever seen this man before?" Frank shook his head. "Not once. But I've seen that look, the one he had. That wasn't a dad looking for his kid. That was control." Hawk nodded grimly. "And she wasn't running from home. She was running from him." Another biker, Diesel, the youngest of the group, stepped closer. "Boss, what do we do?" "Police." Hawk hesitated. He'd dealt with men like that before. The kind who knew how to twist the system. The kind who always seemed to walk free while their victims disappeared. He looked down at the girl again. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl hesitated. "Ellie." "That's a pretty name," Mara said softly. Hawk crouched beside her. "Ellie, that man, or was he really your dad?" Her lip trembled. "He says he is. But my mom, she told me to run if he ever found us." "Why?" Ellie's eyes welled up again. "Because he hurt her. He said if she told anyone, he'd make her disappear." Mara's hand froze on the counter. Frank muttered something under his breath. Hawk leaned back slowly, thinking. "When's the last time you saw your mom, Ellie?" "Last night," Ellie whispered. "She was packing our bags. She said we'd go somewhere safe. Then there was a knock. I hid under the bed like she told me. But when I came out," her voice cracked. "She was gone." The diner went silent. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Hawk exchanged a glance with Diesel, both men's faces tightening. Mara swallowed hard. "And the note?" "It was in my backpack," Ellie said. "She must have put it there before." "Before she—" She stopped, unable to finish. Hawk gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Ellie. You're brave. You did exactly what your mom wanted you to do." Then he stood up, his eyes darkening with resolve. "We're not letting her vanish like that." "Not on my watch," Frank nodded. "What's the plan?" "We'll get her to our clubhouse first," Hawk said. "Safe place. Locked down. Then we'll find out who that man is." Diesel looked out the window. "You think he'll come back?" Hawk's tone dropped. "I know he will." The bikers rode out minutes later, engines roaring against the storm. Mara stood at the diner door, watching as the headlights disappeared into the rain. She clutched the napkin in her hand, feeling its weight like it carried someone's last breath. Frank locked the door behind her. "You think they'll be all right?" Mara nodded slowly. If anyone can keep her safe, it's them. But in her chest, something heavy stayed. That man's eyes, that smile, that last warning. One way or another, she shivered. The Ironhawks clubhouse sat at the edge of town, a converted auto garage surrounded by chain-link fence and floodlights. Inside, it was quieter than most would expect. No loud music, no chaos, just the steady hum of engines cooling down and the smell of leather and rain. Ellie clung to Hawk's jacket as he carried her inside. "Hey, sweetheart," said June, the only woman in the crew, a mechanic with silver streaks in her hair and eyes sharp as steel. "Who's this little angel?" "Name's Ellie," Hawk said. "We're keeping her safe tonight." June took one look at the girl, the bruises peeking from under her sleeve, the wild fear in her eyes, and her face softened. "Bathroom's down that hall, honey. Got blankets and a clean towel waiting for you." Ellie nodded, whispering, "Thank you." As soon as she was out of earshot, June turned to Hawk. "You gonna tell me what the hell's going on?" Hawk handed her the napkin. She read it once, twice. Her face paled. "This is bad, Hawk. Real bad." "I know." June looked up. You thinking what I'm thinking? That man wasn't working alone, Hawk said. There was someone in that car. Someone watching, June frowned. And if her mom really was taken, then she's running out of time. Back at the diner, Mara was cleaning the counter when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence. Then, a man's voice, calm and slow. You shouldn't have interfered. Mara froze. Who is this? Where's the girl? I don't know what you're talking about. You do. The voice turned colder. And I suggest you remember, heroes don't live long in stories like these. The line went dead. Mara's hands shook as she set the phone down. Her reflection in the coffee pot looked pale and frightened. She whispered to herself, Oh, God. What did we just step into? Meanwhile, at the clubhouse, Ellie sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket. She was eating quietly, soup, crackers, the first warm meal she'd had in days. Diesel sat nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone but keeping an eye on her. You got anyone you want to call? He asked gently. Ellie shook her head. No one's left. He didn't push, just nodded. Then from the corner, Hawk's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his expression hardened. When he hung up, Diesel asked, Bad news? Worse, Hawk said. That car, the one from the diner, it's registered to a shell company. Same name tied to 2 missing women across state lines. June stepped closer. You think she's one of them? Hawk nodded grimly. And if we don't find her mom soon, she'll be next. The storm outside raged louder now, thunder echoing like distant drums. But inside that dimly lit garage, something had already shifted. A line had been crossed. A promise had been made, and the Ironhawks, a crew once known for fixing bikes and keeping to themselves, were about to start a war they never asked for. Not for money. Not for pride. For a little girl who whispered the truth no one else had the courage to face. And somewhere, out in that black night, her mother was still alive, waiting, praying someone would follow the trail of rain, oil, and ink that began with a napkin. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but the storm hadn't. Hawk stood outside the clubhouse, smoke curling from the cigarette between his fingers, watching the mist rise off the highway. The world was quiet again, too quiet. The kind of quiet that made a man think something was coming. Inside, the others were already awake. Diesel was checking his laptop, cross-referencing license plates. June was patching a cut on her arm, a souvenir from last night's rush. Ellie was sitting on the worn leather couch, staring at the napkin again. Her small fingers traced over her mother's handwriting as if touching it could make her voice come back. Mara had stopped by before sunrise with a thermos of coffee and that same look of fear in her eyes. She said she didn't sleep. Said the man's voice from the phone kept replaying in her head. I think he's watching me, she whispered. Hawk had promised to post one of his crew outside the diner, just in case. But in his gut, he knew. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just some angry ex or criminal. This felt bigger, organized, ruthless, and Ellie. She was at the center of it. Boss? Diesel called out, spinning the laptop around. Got something. Hawk walked in, coffee in hand. The others gathered around. Diesel zoomed in on a grainy photo, security footage from a gas station 2 towns over. A dark SUV, the same license plate. A man stepping out to fuel it. Even with the bad resolution, you could see it, that face, cold, calculating, like someone used to getting his way. Timestamp? Hawk asked. Midnight. He was heading south. Hawk stared at the screen. Then he noticed something. A reflection in the SUV's window. Just for a moment. A woman's silhouette. Hand pressed to the glass. He froze. Zoom in, Diesel did. The shape became clearer. It was a woman's face. Bruised, terrified. Ellie's mother. Hawk's voice dropped low. She's alive. June's jaw tightened. Then we move. Not yet, Hawk said. We need to know who he is. They spent the next few hours digging. Background checks, public records, social media. Piece by piece, the man's life started to take shape. His name, Robert Kincaid, businessman, philanthropist, donated to police unions and charities. Clean record. Too clean. But hidden under shell companies were connections to transport firms, the kind used for private, deliveries that never got inspected, and 2 women, missing in the past year, both worked for his company. Both had filed complaints before they vanished. June slammed her fist on the table. "This bastard's been buying silence." Hawk's voice turned dark. "Not this time." Meanwhile, Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch, exhaustion finally catching up. June covered her with a blanket and sat nearby, quietly watching her breathe. "You got a daughter, don't you?" Diesel asked softly. June nodded. "Used to. Lost her in a crash 15 years ago." Diesel's face softened. "That's why you're doing this." June gave a small smile. "That's why we're doing this." Across the room, Hawk was already making calls, old favors from old friends. Some were cops, some weren't, but all of them owed him something. By noon, he had what he needed, an address. A property owned by one of Kincaid's shell companies out near the river. Abandoned on paper, but according to one trucker, there were always lights on after dark. Hawk slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Mount up," he said. The Iron Hawks rolled out in a thunder of engines, 10 bikes cutting through the daylight like a convoy of steel and purpose. Ellie rode behind June, helmet on, holding tight. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything, hope, fear. The fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, she'd see her mother again. The wind whipped through their jackets. The highway stretched ahead like a promise. Every mile brought them closer. Every mile carried the weight of something unspoken. Justice, or maybe vengeance. When they finally reached the river road, the air felt heavy. The property sat behind rusted gates and overgrown weeds, the kind of place you'd miss if you didn't know where to look. A large warehouse. Broken windows, no signs. But in the stillness, you could feel it. Presence. June parked first. Hawk raised a hand. "Keep quiet," he said. "We go in slow." Diesel slipped off his helmet, eyes scanning the perimeter. "Cameras. 2 by the gate. Take them out." A click, a soft crackle. Then silence. They moved like ghosts, spreading out, circling the structure. Hawk's boots made no sound as he stepped through the mud. He found a side door half open, faint light spilling through. Inside, voices, male, laughing. He signaled the others. The bikers slipped inside one by one. The smell hit first, gasoline, old oil, and something metallic beneath it. Then the sound, chains rattling. At the far end of the room, behind a stack of crates, a woman sat tied to a chair. Hair matted, wrists bruised, but alive. Ellie's mother. Hawk's heart kicked hard. "There she is." June moved fast, crouching beside the woman. Hey, it's okay. We're here to get you out." The woman's eyes fluttered open. "Ellie! Where's Ellie?" "She's safe," June said, voice breaking into a smile. "She's safe with us." Tears spilled down the woman's face. "Thank God." But before she could say another word, a slow clap echoed from the shadows. "Well," a man's voice drawled. "Looks like my reputation's really gotten around." Hawk turned. Robert Kincaid stepped out from behind the crates, calm, polished, hands in his pockets like he owned the world. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Kincaid said. "Walk away now and maybe I forget this happened." Hawk stared at him. "You hurt her. You threatened a child. You think we walk away from that?" Kincaid smirked. "Everyone walks away from me." Then came the sound of engines. Not theirs. Outside, June's eyes went wide. "Back up." Kincaid stepped closer. "You're not the first to try and play hero. You'll end the same way. Forgotten." Hawk's voice was a growl. "We'll see about that." Outside, the air filled with headlights. 3 black SUVs pulled up, doors slamming, men stepping out, suits, guns, earpieces. Not cops. Private. Inside, Hawk glanced at his crew. "We're outnumbered, but not outplayed." Diesel grinned. "Wouldn't be the first time." June helped the woman stand, wrapping her arm around her. "We get her to the bikes, Hawk. That's all that matters." "Copy that," Hawk said. "Let's move!" They burst through the side door into the open rain, just as the first SUV door opened. Hawk revved his engine. "Ride!" The warehouse yard erupted, engines roaring, shouts cutting through thunder. the smell of gasoline and adrenaline thick in the air. And through it all, the mother held on, her eyes wide, heart pounding, knowing the people saving her weren't just strangers anymore. They were her only shot at freedom. The first gunshot split the air like a lightning strike. Hawk didn't even flinch. "Move!" he barked, and the Iron Hawks exploded into action. Diesel and Rico tore ahead, engines screaming, tires flinging mud as they carved a path through the narrow gate. The sound of gunfire echoed behind them, sharp, angry cracks cutting through the rain. June ducked low, shielding Ellie's mother with her own body as they sprinted toward the bikes. The woman stumbled, half from exhaustion, half from disbelief that she was even still alive. "Come on, stay with me," June urged, her arm firm around the woman's waist. Behind them, Hawk dropped to one knee, fired 2 rounds toward the SUVs, not to kill, but to make them dive for cover. "Anything to buy seconds. Seconds were life right now. Diesel!" he shouted. "Gate clear?" "Almost," Diesel yelled back, his voice barely audible over the roar of engines. "Make it now!" He turned, saw the woman falter, and his chest clenched. She was slipping. "June, take my bike! Get her out!" June hesitated. Hawk never gave up his ride for anyone. Now June. She nodded, helping the woman onto Hawk's Harley. The rain plastered her hair to her face, but her eyes burned with that same fierce light she'd carried since her own daughter's death. The light that refused to let another child lose their mother. Hawk climbed onto Diesel's backup bike, revved the throttle, and turned toward the warehouse. "Boss, what are you—" Diesel started. "Cover them. I'm finishing this." June's bike roared through the gate first, mud splattering her jeans, headlights slicing through the downpour. Ellie's mother clung to her waist, too weak to look back. "Hang on," June shouted, voice shaking. "You're going home." The convoy tore down the river road, water spraying from their tires, hearts pounding. Every second stretched, like the whole world was holding its breath for them. But behind them, the sound of engines grew again, black SUVs giving chase. "They're coming!" Rico shouted over the wind. Diesel gritted his teeth. "Let 'em come." He yanked his bike sideways, skidding across the wet road, blocking the path like a barricade of chrome and fury. One SUV swerved, tires screeching. Too late. Metal met metal, shattering glass, smoke billowing. Rico turned back toward June. "Go!" "Don't stop!" She didn't. Couldn't. The woman behind her was trembling, whispering through tears. "My daughter." "Is she okay?" June's throat tightened. "She's safe, sweetheart. You'll see her soon." The words broke her own heart, because she remembered saying the same thing to her daughter once before the crash. But this time, she wasn't losing anyone. Not if she could help it. Back at the warehouse, Hawk kicked open a side door, storming inside like a man who'd already buried his fear. Kincaid was there, loading something into a briefcase, probably evidence, cash, maybe leverage to stay above the law. "You think you can steal from me, threaten me, and walk away?" Kincaid snarled. Hawk leveled his gun but didn't fire. "You think you can buy fear? You can't. Not from people like us." Kincaid's smirk didn't waver. "You don't understand. I own this town. Every cop, every judge. Not anymore." Hawk cut him off. "You forgot one thing." Kincaid frowned. "What's that?" Hawk nodded toward the corner. A tiny red light blinked, a live feed camera Diesel had planted an hour earlier. "You're already on record, you sick bastard." For the first time, Kincaid's composure cracked. You think anyone will believe a biker over me?" Hawk smiled, the kind that wasn't friendly. "I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to see you." Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. "Feds," Hawk said calmly. "Guess your friends aren't answering your calls anymore." Kincaid's eyes darted toward the back door, and he bolted, but Hawk was faster. He grabbed Kincaid's arm, slammed him against the wall. "That woman, she's free. The girl's free. You? You're done." Then he stepped back and let him go, straight into the blinding red and blue lights flooding the yard. June. Rico and Diesel had reached the old diner by the time the first federal vehicles sped past them. heading toward the warehouse. Inside, Ellie was waiting. She'd been pacing for what felt like hours, clutching that napkin like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. When the roar of engines echoed outside, she ran to the door and froze. June stepped off the bike, soaked to the bone, face streaked with rain and oil. But her smile said everything, and then, behind her, Ellie saw her, her mother. The napkin slipped from Ellie's fingers as she ran forward, tears spilling faster than she could wipe them away. "Mom!" Her mother fell to her knees, arms open, voice breaking. "Ellie! Oh, baby!" They crashed into each other like two halves of a broken heart finally made whole. June turned away, blinking hard. Even Rico looked down, jaw tight, pretending something was in his eye. Diesel let out a shaky breath. "Boss'll want to see this?" "Yeah," June said softly. "He will." Back at the warehouse, Hawk watched as the agents cuffed Kincaid. The man was shouting now, words lost under the thunder and flashing lights. But Hawk didn't care. He pulled out his phone, snapped a picture of the arrest, and sent it to June. A single message followed. "She's free. Take them home." Then for the first time in hours, he let himself breathe. The rain had eased to a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of bikes echoed like a heartbeat returning to calm. He holstered his weapon, looked up at the night sky, and whispered, "Ride safe, little one. You're free now." The next morning, the diner opened again. No broken glass, no blood, just sunlight streaming through the windows and the soft hum of a jukebox. Ellie sat in a booth with her mom, sharing pancakes and quiet laughter. Mara brewed coffee, wiping her eyes now and then when no one was looking. When the doorbell chimed, Ellie turned. The Iron Hawk stood there, soaked, tired but smiling. Hawk nodded to her, then to her mother. "You two doing okay?" Ellie grinned. "Better than okay. Good," Hawk said. "That's what we like to hear." He dropped a feather keychain on the counter. "A little something for luck." Ellie picked it up, eyes shining. "Thank you," Hawk smiled faintly. "Keep it close. It means freedom." And then just like that, the bikers were gone again.
The world looked different when the sun came up. The storm had scrubbed the night clean. Streets gleamed like glass. The air smelled of wet earth, and the town itself felt like it had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. For the first time in what felt like forever, there were no sirens, no shouting, just the sound of birds somewhere near the diner and the distant hum of traffic returning to normal. Inside the diner, the light was soft and golden, filtering through the blinds like forgiveness. Ellie and her mother sat in the corner booth, the one by the window, where the morning sun always found its way first. Her mother's hand still trembled slightly when she reached for the coffee cup. She wasn't used to being free yet. Her body was still learning the meaning of safety. "You don't have to rush," June said gently, setting down a plate of scrambled eggs. "Take your time. You're safe now." The woman nodded, her eyes misty. "I don't even know how to thank you." June smiled, though her own voice caught. "You already did. You survived." Ellie looked between them, confused, but smiling anyway. She'd written her last prayer on that napkin 2 nights ago in a booth not far from this one, and now that prayer sat in her lap, crumpled, tear-stained, answered. Outside, the Iron Hawks were gathered near their bikes. They looked rough, soaked leathers, scraped knuckles, exhausted eyes. But there was a quiet pride among them. Hawk stood a little apart, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. He wasn't good with thank yous. He preferred engines over words, action over applause. But this time something in him was shifting. Diesel came up beside him, tossing a cigarette into the mud. "You okay, boss?" Hawk let out a breath. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" Hawk looked back toward the diner. Through the glass he could see Ellie's mother laughing softly with her daughter, a small sound, but powerful enough to drown out the memory of gunfire. He shook his head. "That little girl reminded me why we started this club in the first place. Not to be feared, to protect, to make things right, even when the world doesn't. Diesel nodded. Feels good to win one for a change. Hawk smirked. Yeah, but don't get used to it. They both chuckled, but behind it was something heavier. The kind of silence that comes after a miracle, when you're still not sure if it was real. By noon, reporters were everywhere. Flashing lights, microphones, endless questions. The news had broken. Local woman rescued from human trafficking ring. Corrupt businessman arrested. They didn't know all the details. They didn't know who had really pulled her from that nightmare. And the Ironhawks preferred it that way. Still, the agents asked for statements. Ellie's mother agreed to testify, her voice shaking but resolute. I won't let him hurt anyone else, she said, her hand resting over Ellie's. Not ever again. That afternoon, Hawk stood quietly in the courthouse lobby, waiting while the formalities unfolded. He wasn't supposed to be there. Technically, he shouldn't have been anywhere near the case. But when Ellie's mother saw him through the crowd, she walked straight up and hugged him without hesitation. You don't know what you gave me, she whispered. You didn't just save my life. You gave my daughter her mother back. Hawk froze. For a man built like a mountain, that hug undid him completely. He swallowed hard, his voice low. You did the hard part. We just opened the door. She pulled back and smiled faintly. Then thank you for opening it. Later that evening, the Ironhawks met again at the diner, their unofficial home base. The world outside was still buzzing with headlines, but inside it was calm. Mara served coffee and pie like always, pretending she didn't notice how quiet they all were. June leaned back, arms crossed. So, what now? Rico shrugged. Same thing we always do. Ride. Wait for the next storm. But Hawk shook his head. Not this time. They all looked at him. He took a slow sip of coffee, then set the mug down. I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we stop just reacting. Maybe it's time we start finding people like her before it's too late. June's eyebrows lifted. You mean like, make it official? Yeah, Hawk said. A foundation. Quiet, off the books. We find people who fall through the cracks, the ones nobody's coming for, and we bring them home. Diesel grinned. So we're adding guardian angels to our resume. Hawk smirked. Something like that. The room went still for a moment. Not because they were unsure, but because they all knew what it meant. A new beginning. A second purpose. Outside, the last of the storm clouds broke apart, revealing a slice of blue sky. Before leaving, Hawk walked back to that same booth where Ellie sat coloring on a napkin again. She looked up and smiled shyly. Hi. Hi, kiddo. Hawk crouched down beside her. What are you drawing? She turned the napkin around. It was a picture of a motorcycle, big, shiny, with wings on the sides, and on the seat sat a little girl holding her mom's hand. Hawk stared at that for a long second. That's beautiful. Ellie grinned. It's you. You saved us. He smiled, not his usual smirk, but a soft, real smile that almost never surfaced. Maybe, but you gave us something too. What? Hope. She thought about it, then nodded like she understood. I'll draw more for you. I'd like that, Hawk said quietly. Keep drawing, okay? Never stop. He stood, placed a folded $20 on the counter, and nodded to Mara for her next pancakes. Then, as the bell above the door jingled, the Ironhawks walked out into the sunlight, engines roaring, tires spinning, their silhouettes fading into the horizon. But this time, their ride wasn't just a getaway. It was a promise. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and old paper, like every secret it held had been filed away years ago and forgotten. But today, it felt alive. Cameras lined the steps. Reporters shouted questions that echoed off the marble walls. And inside, the air buzzed with tension. The state versus Calvin Reese. The name alone carried weight, a respected businessman, donor, and pillar of the community. Until now. Ellie and her mother sat near the front, their hands intertwined. The bruises on her mother's face had faded to faint yellow. but her eyes still carried the memory of fear. Across the room, Calvin Reese smirked like the entire process was beneath him. His expensive suit, his polished shoes, everything about him screamed control. But not today. Today, he was cornered. And the people who'd cornered him weren't the kind you could intimidate with money. Hawk stood in the back of the courtroom, arms crossed, leather jacket zipped to his throat. He hadn't wanted to be there. He hated suits, hated bureaucracy, hated the hypocrisy of justice that only worked when the cameras were watching. But he owed it to Ellie's mother to see it through. Diesel leaned beside him, whispering, "Think they'll actually put him away?" Hawk's jaw tightened. If there's any justice left in this system, yeah. "Big if," Diesel muttered. The prosecutor stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried fire under its surface. She didn't just present evidence, she told a story. A story of a woman who'd been trapped, blackmailed, and silenced. A story of a man who'd used power to cage the powerless. And a story of how one terrified child and a group of unlikely heroes had changed everything. When Ellie's mother took the stand, the courtroom went still. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, strength bled through each word. "I stayed because I thought there was no way out," she said. "He made me believe I was invisible, that no one would believe me. But that night, someone did." Her gaze flicked toward the back, toward Hawk and the Iron Hawks, lined up in quiet support. They showed up when no one else would. Calvin's lawyer tried to twist her words, to poke holes, to paint her as unstable. But she didn't falter, not this time, because this time she wasn't alone. When the jury left to deliberate, time seemed to crawl. The walls ticked with every heartbeat, and Ellie sat fidgeting beside her mother, clutching the same napkin she'd drawn on the motorcycle. Hawk watched from his corner, restless like a caged lion. Then the door opened. The jurors filed back in. The foreman stood, and when he spoke, 3 words shattered the silence. "Guilty on all counts." The gasp that followed wasn't loud. It was like an exhale held too long. Ellie's mother covered her face, sobbing. Hawk closed his eyes, head bowed. For once, justice had actually done its job. Calvin Reese's mask finally cracked. As the bailiff led him away, he turned toward Ellie's mother and spat. "You think this changes anything? You're still nothing!" But before anyone could react, Hawk was already moving, fast, silent, controlled. He didn't touch him, didn't raise his voice, just stepped close enough that Calvin could see his eyes, cold, steady, unblinking. "You're wrong," Hawk said quietly. "She's free. That changes everything." Calvin flinched. For the first time, the man looked small. And then he was gone, swallowed by the system he thought he owned. After the verdict, the courthouse emptied slowly. Reporters tried to chase Ellie's mother for statements, but she ignored them all, clutching her daughter's hand. They had nothing left to prove. Outside, the Iron Hawks waited by their bikes. No headlines, no credit, no spotlight. Just quiet satisfaction and something heavier than pride. As Hawk went to mount his bike, Ellie's mother called out, "Wait!" He turned, surprised. She walked up, holding a small envelope. "I found this," she said softly, "in the records the FBI gave me. I thought you should have it." He frowned, taking it. "What is it?" She hesitated. "I think it's from your past." Hawk's heart skipped, and for the first time, something close to confusion flickered across his face. He opened the envelope. Inside was a faded letter, edges yellowed, handwriting shaky but unmistakable. It was addressed to Eli Hawk Turner. He hadn't heard that name in 20 years. The letter was from a woman named Ruth Turner, his mother. She died when he was 15, long before he joined the Ironhawks. But as his eyes scanned the words, his breath caught. "If you ever find this, Eli, please know I never gave up looking for your brother. His name is Calvin. They took him from me when he was a baby. I hope you both find your way back someday. Don't let the world turn your heart cold." Hawk froze. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind whipping through the parking lot. June whispered, "Jesus, Hawk." He crumpled the letter in his hand, eyes glassy but unreadable. "Guess she got her wish. We found our way back, just not how she meant." The group fell silent. Even Diesel didn't have a joke for this one. Hawk finally tucked the letter into his jacket and said, quietly, "Let's ride." As the Ironhawks roared away from the courthouse, Ellie stood on the steps with her mother watching them go. She didn't know the whole story, only that those men had saved her life. But something about the way Hawk rode, steady, unflinching, carrying ghosts in his wake, told her he wasn't just a hero. He was a man still fighting his own war. And maybe, just maybe, that was what made him human. The road home was long and quiet. The kind of quiet that sits deep in your chest. Not peace, not pain, just weight. The Ironhawks rode in formation, engines low, cutting through the late afternoon sun. Wind whipped through their jackets, scattering dust and dead leaves, carrying the sound of thunder down empty miles of highway. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Sometimes, silence says everything. Hawk led the line, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The envelope still sat in his jacket pocket, its edges soft from being opened and refolded again and again since they'd left the courthouse. Inside it was the truth, a truth he never asked for, but couldn't unlearn. The man they'd taken down, the monster who'd broken a family, had shared his blood. And that realization was harder to carry than any chain, scar, or secret he'd ever worn. But beneath the ache was something else. Something his mother had written that refused to leave his mind. "Don't let the world turn your heart cold." He'd spent most of his life proving her wrong, but maybe this was his last chance to prove her right. They stopped near dusk at a small roadside chapel. Old, weathered wood, cross slightly tilted, the kind of place no one went unless they were running from something or trying to let something go. Hawk parked his bike, pulled off his helmet, and just stood there for a moment, staring at the crooked sign that read, "Rest easy, weary traveler." Diesel and June hung back with the others, understanding without words that this stop was his alone. Hawk stepped through the gate, boots crunching against gravel. The cemetery was quiet. Rows of forgotten names faded into the dirt. But near the back, beneath a small oak tree, was the one he came for. Ruth Turner, 1956 to 1994. She rode her storms. Hawk knelt, brushing dust from the headstone. The leather creaked as he leaned forward, placing the letter beside the flowers already there. "Guess you were right, Ma. We found each other, just not the way you hoped." His voice caught, just a fraction. He exhaled through it. "I spent years hating what I didn't understand. Turns out, blood don't mean love. It just means chance. You gave me the better one." He reached into his jacket again and pulled out something small, the napkin drawing Ellie had made, a shaky outline of a motorcycle, a girl and a little son in the corner. He smiled faintly. "Kid's gonna be all right." He tucked the napkin beside the letter. "Thanks for keeping an eye on her." The wind shifted then, gentle, carrying the scent of rain and engine oil, and something cleaner underneath. Hawk closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, the weight in his chest didn't feel like guilt. It felt like letting go. When he returned to the group, Diesel just nodded. No questions, no words, just brotherhood. They rode into the evening, the horizon glowing gold and red like a slow-burning fire. Cars moved aside as they passed, people staring but never quite understanding what they were seeing. To the world, they looked like outlaws. To those who knew better, they were something rarer, a promise that sometimes the broken are the ones who do the fixing. Back at the diner, the bell chimed when Hawk walked in. Ellie was there, sitting in a booth with her mom, drawing on another napkin. When she saw him, she ran over. "You came back!" "Didn't plan to, but I figured someone still owes me a rematch on that drawing." Ellie giggled. "You're gonna lose again." "Probably." He smiled. Not the cold smirk people usually saw, but something real, unguarded. Her mother came over, eyes soft. "I don't know how to thank you." Hawk shook his head. "You already did. You survived." As he turned to leave, Ellie called out, "Hey, Mr. Hawk, what happens now?" He looked back, grin faint but sure. "Now, kid, we ride." And then he was gone, the rumble of engines fading into twilight, the sound blending with laughter and clinking coffee cups. The diner's neon sign flickered to life behind them, casting a warm glow across the window where Ellie's napkin drawing now hung, taped for everyone to see. A motorcycle, a sun, and beneath it, one word written in her shaky handwriting: freedom. If this story reminded you that heroes don't always wear badges, sometimes they wear leather, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Have you ever seen someone stand up when no one else would? Tell us in the comments. Your story might inspire our next tale of courage and justice. And for our sharp-eyed viewers, there's a tiny moment around minute 7:23 when Hawk looks at the letter one last time that reveals something only a few will notice. Watch again and tell us what you think he whispers under his breath before the engines start. Because sometimes redemption doesn't roar, it rides.